Hi everyone, I'm Shaylin here with Reedsy. So today I'm bringing you some NaNoWriMo productivity tips. Since it's the first week of NaNoWriMo, or National Novel Writing Month, if you're not familiar with NaNoWriMo, it's a yearly writing challenge that takes place in November, where you can challenge yourself to try to write 50,000 words in 1 month. The point of this challenge is definitely a little more productivity focused. The whole mindset behind it is to turn off your internal editor, stop editing your book, stop nitpicking it, and just get the draft done. So it's a great challenge for those who maybe struggle to get through manuscripts or who just need kind of an extra boost of productivity. So today I've got 8 different NaNoWriMo productivity tips to help you keep up and boost your productivity throughout the month. Normally, I don't really believe in, a quantity over quality mindset. When it comes to writing, I definitely think the opposite. But for many people, the whole idea of putting aside the need for high quality writing in lieu for just committing to getting your draft done can be super beneficial for them. Definitely don't prioritize productivity over quality if that just doesn't work for you. That kind of stresses me out in my own writing. But for a lot of people, this challenge can be super beneficial. I attribute NaNoWriMo to why I finished my first novel. And so because there is a little more of a productivity focus throughout November for a lot of people, I've got some productivity tips to keep you going throughout the month and hopefully help you reach your word goal. My first tip is to do writing sprints, and if you can, to do them with a buddy. So the idea of a writing sprint is almost the same idea behind NaNoWriMo in a very compressed time period. So you set a timer, usually somewhere between 10 to 20 minutes, and you just write without giving into any distractions until the timer goes up. And I do think that writing sprints are often the most beneficial when you're able to do them with a buddy to kind of keep you on track and motivate you. Writing sprints are a great way to get your daily writing in a pretty short period of time, rather than just kind of, waffling around and writing a little bit here, then getting distracted. You just commit for 20 minutes, write as much as you can, maybe take a quick break, maybe do another writing sprint. You might even be able to get your whole writing done for the day. If you're reaching for the 50,000 NaNoWriMo word count, that's about 1,700 words. You might even be able to get that done in just a couple writing sprints. So it can help compress the time period needed to get your words done per day. It can really motivate you. And doing them with a buddy is just a great way to keep on track, to stay accountable. If you need buddies to write with, we'll be hosting some NaNoWriMo writing sprints on this channel on the 10th in a live stream. So feel free to join in for that, but also do your own writing sprints throughout the month whenever you need that kind of extra productivity boost. They really are one of my favorite things when I feel like I'm in a bit of a rut and I can't get any words done. Tip number 2 is for all my fellow afternoon or evening writers out there, which I think is a lot of people, at least anyone who doesn't really have time to write during the day, is to try and write just at least a couple sentences in the morning. I know for a lot of people, we don't really have time to write until the afternoon or evening. We don't really have time to write until after work most of the time. But I find that during NaNoWriMo, it really helps to write just a couple sentences in the morning, maybe before work, or maybe at lunch, something like that. The reason is because if you've already opened your document and already engaged with your manuscript, it is a lot easier to come back and start working on it later on in the day. If when you start your main writing session sometime in the evening, you've already looked at your manuscript and already written a couple sentences, you've kind of already broken through the most difficult part of writing, which is those first few sentences. You've already gotten started for the day. So it's a lot easier to break back into it. So if you can split your writing into a couple sessions, even if that first writing session is just super quick, just a couple sentences, just 5 minutes, it can make it way easier to come back to the draft later on. Tip number 3 is to keep up the momentum. One of the best parts of NaNoWriMo is that it allows you to build up writing momentum, and that momentum can kind of carry you even if your motivation starts to dip. But in order to make the most of that, you have to make sure that you're actually keeping up the momentum. It's almost guaranteed that there will be at least one day in the month where you don't hit your word goal. That's to be expected. Very few people are writing exactly 1,667 words every single day, and nothing more, nothing less. There are going to be days that you write a little more or a little less. But try to keep up the momentum by writing at least a sentence every single day. Even though it might seem negligible in terms of progress to just write one sentence on a day where you're otherwise super busy or super tired, the benefit is that it keeps up your momentum. If you start to take a bunch of breaks, you start to break up your writing momentum, and then you have to start rebuilding it. It just kind of chops it up. So try to engage with your project just every single day. And on those days where maybe you don't have the time to actually dedicate a significant amount of time to your project or hit word count, you can still keep up your writing momentum so it's easier to come back to the project the next day. Tip number 4, don't be afraid to jump around. You certainly don't have to write your project in order if you don't want to. Even if you're normally a linear writer, I know I'm normally a linear writer and I normally just write things in order. Sometimes desperate times, such as NaNoWriMo, call for desperate measures, and if hitting the word count is really important to you, sometimes you have to find creative ways to get there. One such way is writing out of order. If you get to a part of your book where you're just stuck, you can't figure it out, and it's really stalling you, don't be afraid to write a section of the book that comes much later. Don't be afraid to write a scene that's going to happen in a few chapters. This will allow you to keep writing and keep producing words, stay engaged with your project, and keep getting closer to your word count goal, even if you're at a part of the book that has you a little stuck. However, that brings me to tip number 5. If you get stuck, work through the block as quickly as possible. I know this sounds easier said than done. I'm sure we've all experienced this. You're writing, it's going fine, and then suddenly the book just grinds to a halt. You reach a point where you just can't really figure out your own story. You're not sure how to get the characters from point A to point B. You've written yourself into a corner. We've all been there. And unfortunately, you will probably write yourself into a corner at least one time during NaNoWriMo. Honestly, the secret to getting out of it is to just write your way through it. The problem won't really solve itself if you're not actively working on it. The best way to get through these blocks is honestly just to skim over them. Come up with the most ridiculous, dumb solution. It doesn't matter if it's super bad, if it doesn't really make sense. Do whatever you need to get the plot moving again. The scene might be terribly written. It might make absolutely no sense. You probably are going to know that you're going to need to revisit this part of the book in revision. Put a little asterisk next to it and come back to it later. But it's better that you write something kind of bad that doesn't really make sense and get the plot moving again, knowing that you can come back and look at this scene later, than just get stuck. When I get stuck, I like to remind myself, okay, just write this as simply as you possibly can. Say it as simply as you can. Don't worry about the prose sounding nice. It doesn't even have to read like a real scene. And it usually doesn't take that long before things are moving again. But the plot isn't going to get moving again if you just stare at it and just think about it. When I did NaNoWriMo last year, I was quite surprised at the effectiveness of this because I got to quite a few points in the book where, I wrote myself into a little bit of a corner and I didn't really know how to get out of it. And these are the places where normally, outside of NaNoWriMo, I would just get a little stuck, and it might take me a week or so to get out of it. But because it was NaNoWriMo, I had to keep writing. My goal for NaNoWriMo was to write every single day. And so I would kind of just write my way out of it, even if the solution seemed kind of dumb at first. But I was quite surprised because most of the time, the scene I wrote to just kind of fudge my way out of the problem actually turned into something I really liked. So most of the time it actually worked out quite well. And then I was past the problem and onto a part of the book that was easier to write. So that really is my tried and true tip. I think it's the best way to get out of a block is literally just to write your way through it as simply as possible. And if you have to come back to it later, then you have to come back to it later, and that's totally fine. Tip number 6, set aside time to reflect and brainstorm. Sometimes during NaNoWriMo, especially if you're very focused on reaching the word count goal, it can be really easy to just go, write, and end up burning yourself out before the month is over. In order to keep up momentum and keep producing, it's just as important that you set aside time to think and reflect on your project as you do actually writing it. If you just write, but you never really give yourself time to think and brainstorm, you're going to run out of inspiration and you're just going to tire yourself out. Allow yourself time to think and reflect, to generate new ideas. A lot of the time we need to kind of think about writing and be excited to write the project in order to actually write it. If you're just writing and you're not giving yourself time to actually think and reflect, sometimes you can run out of energy. The next tip is a bit of a classic one, but I think a good one to employ during NaNoWriMo, and it's to try to end your writing sessions in the middle of a scene. It can make it easier to get into writing the next day if you stop in the middle of a scene rather than at the end of a scene. If you stop at the end of the scene, when you come back the next day, you're gonna have to start a whole new scene and figure out where you are and get things moving. But if you always end in the middle of a scene, you'll be at an active point in the story and it'll be much easier to get back into writing the next day. So if you feel like it's hard for you to get into writing at the start of each day, maybe it's because of where you're ending your scenes at the end of each writing session. So instead of ending at the end of a scene or the end of a chapter, end at a moment that's really exciting and where you're excited and you know what to write next. And the final tip is to prep your next day's writing sessions. So before you log off for the day, just do a quick prep for the next day's writing session. It only has to take 5 minutes. Just quickly think about the scene that you want to write and think about how it's going to work, how it's going to be arranged or choreographed, and maybe just take a couple brief notes. This can just make getting into the next day of writing a bit easier, so you don't sit down to write and you're like, wait, what am I going to write today? I don't even know. It can be easier to do this planning after a writing session than at the beginning of a writing session because you've just spent some time with the project, so you're more engaged with it, So before you log off for the day, just take a couple brief notes on what the next scene is going to be, so you have a bit of a plan for the next day. It'll make it much easier to get back into writing. So those are some NaNoWriMo productivity tips to help you get through the month. I would love to hear what tips you are using to get through NaNoWriMo this year. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos from us. We've got new writing, editing, and publishing tips every Tuesday and Friday. Until next time, bye.